Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can talk about the characteristics of a daughter who is narcissistic. So this is really from the perspective of the mother and father. So I'm going to answer this question by providing the 10 signs of a daughter who is narcissistic. Now, of course, a number of these signs would also apply to a son. One of the presumptions with this list, of course, is that the parents are effective parents. They're good parents. They're not treating the daughter poorly. Because if they were treating the daughter poorly, some of these signs would really perhaps point to something else and not narcissism. So the behavior I'll talk about in these signs is behavior I've noticed in my clinical experience, and sometimes we see this in the research literature as well. This doesn't mean that someone is definitely narcissistic if they have one or more of these signs, and it certainly doesn't speak to anything related to diagnosing. For example, narcissistic personality disorder. Only a licensed and qualified clinician can assign that diagnosis. Now, when somebody is young, narcissism is fairly normal. We expect children to be narcissistic, and of course this would include daughters. But we know as people grow older, the narcissism tends to drop. And usually in daughters, we would expect the narcissism to start dropping fairly significantly by age 18 or 19. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but either way, we would expect to see the narcissism and we would expect to see it drop a bit. Sometimes, however, the narcissism carries on as somebody grows older, and sometimes it even gets worse. And what this does is it really puts a strain on the relationships that the daughter has, including the relationships with the parents. Parents endure narcissism from a daughter more so than they would from like strangers, of course, because that's their daughter, that makes sense. And because they endure this behavior, they're exposed potentially to a lot more damage from that narcissistic relationship. So it becomes a really, I think, tricky issue, right? Nobody wants to give up on their daughter, right? If their daughter's narcissistic or has any number of other personality traits, parents want to stick it out. They want to find a way to make that relationship work no matter what's going on with the daughter. So before I get into the signs, I'm going to briefly describe narcissism. In this video, these signs relate both to grandiose and to vulnerable narcissism, the two major types of narcissism. All narcissism is characterized by being self-centered, having a sense of entitlement, requiring admiration, and having low agreeableness, so being disagreeable or antagonistic. With grandiose narcissism, we see characteristics like being socially dominant, extroverted, arrogant, resistant to criticism. This is a fairly obvious manifestation of narcissism, and sometimes grandiose is also called overt narcissism. The other type, as I mentioned, is vulnerable. Here we see a lot of shame, hypersensitivity to criticism, being resentful. This is a little hard to see. It's a little less obvious. It's also called covert narcissism. So I mentioned that narcissism starts young and usually continues for life to some extent. And of course, as I mentioned, it can be severe throughout the lifespan. I tried to order these signs so that the earlier signs line up with behavior we would expect to see when a narcissistic daughter is younger, and the later signs tend to align with behaviors we'd see as she moves into adolescence and young adulthood. So sign number 1 that a daughter is narcissistic, this would be constantly wanting and maybe even needing approval, trying to impress the parents and trying to impress teachers. So this is kind of interesting because there can be a lot of motivation to do positive things. For example, good grades, right? Good grades are not necessarily about achievement, about actually achieving a good grade for some sort of internal reward, but sometimes it's for the reaction of the teacher. And this indicates narcissism much more strongly than somebody who does it for an internal reason. So if a daughter is working for good grades, but the reason she gets those good grades is because she wants that teacher to react, that's a crucial part of earning the grades. Again, that points more toward narcissism. Good deeds for a narcissistic daughter must be observed. So narcissists and non-narcissists do good things, of course, but the narcissist wants credit. So the narcissistic daughter is always looking to teachers, parents, siblings, grandparents, cousins, friends to show them their good deeds, to show them what a good job they did, again, specifically to acquire that admiration. Moving to sign number 2, this is when the daughter is not directable. This may seem like a small thing sometimes, but when a daughter won't take direction, it can be frustrating for parents regardless of the age of the daughter. But of course we tend to use this term directable more in reference to someone who's younger. So a daughter that won't go to bed on time, who won't get dressed for school, who won't do her homework. Now, these particular signs, of course, could also be a sign of ADHD or other mental disorders. So again, we have to be careful when interpreting the signs of a daughter who's narcissistic. Sign number 3 is that all criticism or advice is poorly received and almost never followed. We see this comes in a lot of different versions, magnifying the criticism. So if you're criticizing a narcissistic daughter for not doing homework, she might say, "You hate me." So she really just magnified that criticism and actually distorted that criticism into something completely different. So asking a daughter to do her homework, and that moves into hatred. We see dismissing the source. So the daughter who's narcissistic might say, "You don't know what you're talking about. When you were young, they used stone tablets to do homework," right? Like a chisel and stone tablets. So suggesting the parents are old, but also out of touch with technology and how things are done these days. Similar to this would be kind of the "you know nothing" argument, and this would be sticking to this belief even when the evidence shows otherwise. This is actually fairly common when a narcissistic daughter is in love too. That first love interest, that's a point where the parents just seem to know nothing all of a sudden, right? We see this pretty frequently with daughters who are narcissistic and sometimes with daughters who are not narcissistic. Also under the same sign, number 3, we see pointing out the disparity in treatment between herself and siblings. My brother never has to do his homework, right? So kind of pointing out there's a difference there. We also see yelling, crying, not talking at all, and maybe doing the homework, if that's the example, with less than 100% effort. So whatever the criticism or advice is about, maybe following it a little bit, but not really doing it correctly. It's a form of resistance, essentially. We also see counterattacking, and this is actually extremely common. It's a fairly effective distraction technique that narcissists of all types tend to use. So for example, if you say to the daughter, "Hey, look, you need to clean your room," she might say, "Well, you never clean your room. Your room's so dirty and cluttered that I almost fall down when I walk in there," right? So kind of taking the attention off of her dirty room and putting it on some sort of flaw that the parents would have. Sign number 4 is being jealous of a sibling, and this would be more so than we would usually see, because this type of jealousy with siblings is fairly common. So this would be something like, "You've always loved them more than me," when talking about siblings, playing the victim. And what becomes, I think, complicated here is that the truth is sometimes parents do have favorites, right? And to put it bluntly, sometimes parents do love one child more than another. This actually happens all the time. This is remarkably common. But a lot of parents, of course, want to say that they love all their children equally, which makes sense. That's a socially desirable thing to indicate. So if the narcissistic daughter is not the favorite, that adds kind of credence to this argument. It makes it a little bit more credible. If they are the favorite, though, they tend to say the same thing. They still play the victim, although being the favorite, I think, does satisfy the narcissistic daughter for a while. This can be something that is really consistent with the narcissistic attitude and can therefore be agreeable to a daughter who's narcissistic, right? So if they are the favorite, this particular sign, sign number 4, I don't think is as visible. Sign number 5 is taking sides with one parent against the other. And usually this is in a fairly mean-spirited way. Again, not the normal behavior we would expect to see between parents and a daughter. So they might say something like, to a mother, they might say, "You're the reason Dad left." Or to a father, "You're making Mom unhappy." They might say, "I wish Dad would leave you so I can live with him." Or, "I don't know how she tolerates you." Or something a little bit more antagonistic, like, "Dad says you're a terrible lover." Ouch, that one's pretty rough. And Mom says if it weren't for having kids, she would have left a long time ago. That one's also a little bit unkind, right? And these are ones I've heard many times in the context of my clinical experience. So these aren't remarkably unusual statements for daughters to make in order to take sides with one parent against the other. This taking sides can be the basis for a grudge that's held forever, right? So this particular sign, sign number 5, I think more so than many of the other signs, becomes kind of a foundation for an argument against one of the parents, right? So you never treated Mom right, you never treated Dad right, whatever it is. This becomes a grudge that that daughter can hold potentially for the remainder of that relationship, for however long that relationship with the parents will last. Sign number 6 is the overuse of social media, especially in the area of attractiveness like beauty and with popularity. So pictures posted on social media that feature the daughter with a large number of friends, establishing that a lot of people like her. We see a lot of comparisons between the daughter's social media performance and that of their friends, like how many likes that a particular post receives or something like that. And with this, we also see increasingly surprising and shocking tactics to get attention on social media platforms. So being more dramatic and being more revealing sometimes to attract attention. And this could include saying really unkind things about the parents, right? So again, kind of playing the victim on social media to attract attention. Even though that necessarily wouldn't be positive attention, at some point that might not matter. Moving to sign number 7, this one involves when the daughter gets to an age where she could go find a job. So in many places this would be around 16. So in a job setting, they might feel like they're being demeaned by having an entry-level position, like a cashier at a fast food restaurant or someone who works on the sales floor of a retail store. So even just a few days into working this type of job, the daughter may come home and tell her siblings or her parents that if she was the boss there, everything would improve where she works. If she ran the place, the problems would be gone, sales would be up, employees would be happier. She also doesn't think highly of her coworkers. She may refer to them as idiots or people that really deserve to have low-level jobs, and she deserves to have a higher-level job. So putting herself at a different level even though they're working in the same position. There's typically a lack of respect for the chain of command, right? So not respecting a manager or a supervisor. The exception here would be if that supervisor really admires them. Sometimes this admiration can win the narcissistic daughter over for a while. We also see that the narcissistic daughter expects an allowance from her parents even when she starts working. So the money earned at the job just isn't enough. Sign number 8 is being extremely focused on appearance, noting that her attractiveness is superior to yours as the parents. This is usually more directed at the mother than the father. So this could be something that the daughter has always believed is true, like she's always believed that she's more attractive than the mother or the father. Or it could be some sort of commentary on aging. Like one thing I've heard narcissistic daughters say before is, "It's my time to shine, your time is over," right? Referring to the parents. So again, kind of overemphasizing the value of youth and beauty and assuming that just because the parents are older, they're automatically unattractive, or at least not as attractive as the daughter. So this has kind of a shallow component to it. Sign number 9 is the daughter believes that you are jealous of them as the parents, right? So this jealousy could be because of beauty, a perceived difference in beauty. You could be jealous of them because they're single and not married to somebody as bad as their other parent, right? Again, in their opinion. You could be jealous of their youth, jealous of their boyfriend, jealous of their career, success, their social network, or they'll try to make you jealous if they believe you're not jealous, right? So if they sense you don't really seem to care, you're indifferent, they may go out of their way to make you feel envy. For example, if the daughter's at an age where she may have in-laws, right? So she finds somebody, they get married, and now they're in-laws. She may say that those in-laws are the parents that she never had, right? Really kind of putting you as her parents up against the in-laws in some sort of competition. Narcissistic daughters may also weaponize the relationship with the grandchildren, like petty games. So let them spend time with the in-laws, but not with you. Or not letting you see them at all. Maybe saying something like, "I don't want you to do to them what you did to me." Again, kind of suggesting that they were mistreated by the parents when they were younger. Also, the daughter may be jealous of her own children. I actually see this quite a bit. Specifically, the way the parents treat her children, right? So, when I was young, you never treated me that well. You never loved me as much as you love your grandchildren. So the jealousy isn't contained to just the parents, right? It can extend to everybody, including the daughter's children. Sign number 10 of a daughter who's narcissistic is she seems to be highly interested in whatever inheritance she expects to get. She tends to overestimate the dangers of aging. So, for example, she may think that when her parents turn 65 or 75 or something, that they're going to die within a few months, right? Not realizing that people can live well into their 80s or 90s or sometimes even longer than that. She may treat the parents nicely if she thinks that will increase the chances of getting an inheritance. She'll be highly sensitive to siblings that are also interested in the material possessions that the parents have. She gets very angry at the parents for spending money, especially on items that aren't technically necessary, like vacations, jewelry, a luxury car. The more the parents spend, the less money is available for the daughter. The daughter also may become upset when she hears stories of other relatives who have lived a long time, right? Thinking that, of course, that genetic contribution could mean that the parents will live a long time, right? So if she's looking at her grandparents and they lived into their late 90s, that may make the daughter distressed because now she's worried she's not going to see her inheritance because her parents are going to live so long. So this is really kind of a Machiavellianistic attitude, right? A materialistic attitude. And of course, that's highly consistent with narcissism. So having a daughter who is narcissistic, as I mentioned before, can be a real challenge. Parents often feel really guilty about this. They feel like they caused their daughter to become narcissistic, and they're frustrated because now they have to deal with that narcissism. Many times the parents and the daughter become estranged. I see this all the time. Sometimes it's because the daughter chooses that. That's actually fairly common. But sometimes it's because the parents eventually reject the daughter because they simply can't tolerate the narcissism. And other attempts they've had at setting boundaries have failed. So they just end up ceasing to have any type of relationship with the daughter, which of course is very painful for the parents and typically would be for the daughter as well. Sometimes, however, the lack of a relationship is a mutual decision. The parents and the daughter agree that they're better off not having any relationship. I know whenever I talk about topics like daughters who are narcissistic, there'll be a variety of opinions, people who agree with me and disagree with me, and have other thoughts and examples from their own life experiences. Please put those opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They always generate a really interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found these 10 signs of a daughter who's narcissistic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.